They were replaced by units based upon a design introduced by the LMS onto their Wirral electric lines in 1938. These gave yeoman service, the last being withdrawn in 1985 to be replaced by the current rolling stock. LMS-designed electrics dating from 1940 were familiar and regular performers on the heavily used commuter lines radiating out from Liverpool Exchange to Southport and Ormskirk. Both types of LMS stock survived long enough to operate through the new tunnels opened in 1977. Known as the Loop and Link, these transformed local rail travel. The reorganisation did, however, lead to the closure of Exchange Station, although the facade has been retained. The early electrification of the Mersey Railway had a profound effect upon the ferry services. The trains were unaffected by adverse weather conditions, they made the under-river journey in 3 minutes, and they terminated in the heart of Liverpool. The ferries had been among the first in the country to come under municipal control. Until 1929, a variety of ferries crossed the river from Eastham in the south to New Brighton in the north. At their height, the steam-powered vessels operated at frequent intervals during the rush hours, with each boat carrying hundreds of passengers. Night boats were also provided, and during the summer, additional vessels were run to New Brighton. The ferries arrived and departed at the southern end of the giant landing stage. Both Birkenhead and Wallasey operated goods or luggage boats. Access to all 3 major termini was eventually by means of a floating roadway, where an incredible mixture of cross-river traffic would assemble. It required skill and ingenuity on the part of the ferry staff to squeeze as many lorries, cars and motorcycles, as well as horses and carts, onto the slippery decks. The luggage boats became an increasing irrelevancy following the opening of the first road tunnel in July 1934, although the Seacombe service survived until 1947. Loadings on the passenger ferries were also affected by the opening of the tunnel. Some of the crossings, like Rock Ferry, closed altogether. These views in fact being taken on the last day of service in 1939. Whilst those to New Brighton were reduced to seasonal operation only. The classic ferry steamers were slowly withdrawn, being replaced by smaller, less expensive boats. The last of the traditional vessels was the Wallasey. Built in 1927, she made her last crossings in 1963. The most unusual vessel of recent years was the revolutionary diesel-electric Royal Iris, delivered in 1951. Equipped with a dance floor, bars and other eating places, she could cater for the cruise trade as well as being a regular passenger ship. Initially, she was subjected to all manner of derision, being nicknamed the floating fish and chip shop. Here she is seen in 1960, handling the crowds waiting to embark for New Brighton. Despite the growing number of cars, thousands of day trippers would still cross to New Brighton at the first sign of good weather. However, faced by falling traffic and plagued by drifting sandbanks, the last boats made the 25-minute crossing in September 1971. Once it even looked as if the famous ferries might disappear altogether. The number of vessels has certainly been reduced, even the Royal Iris finally reaching the end of the road after over 40 years of service. Today, a trio of former Birkenhead Corporation boats are sufficient for the present level of ferry activity. Another first, this time at Birkenhead, where the first horse-drawn street tramway in the country was opened in 1861. In recognition of this, a tourist tramway is to operate from Woodside, site of the terminus of the original line. Birkenhead gradually progressed to electric trams, which ran between 1900 and 1937. All the routes terminated at Woodside, where connection was made with the corporation's ferry boats. Included in the fleet were some former single-deckers, rebuilt as double-deckers. These worked exclusively on the new ferry route abandoned in 1931 and were reputed to be among the noisiest trams in Britain. Wallasey's electric trams all operated between Seacombe and New Brighton via different routes. These rare views were taken at Liscard in 1933. Whilst Birkenhead and Wallasey were scrapping their trams, Liverpool was embarking upon a policy of modernisation. The central terminus at the pier head was dominated by 3 large turning circles. Here, a constant stream of trams would swallow up the passengers swarming off the ferries. The city's older short wheelbase trams hardly had a reputation for smooth riding. Improvements were made over the years, including the provision of enclosed top decks. This tram is carrying a postbox. But it was the arrival of hundreds of modern bogie cars built in the corporation's own workshops which for a brief period altered the public's perception of the tram. The first of these, which appeared in 1933, sported a new green and cream livery, and they were instantly dubbed Green Goddesses after a popular film of the day. The name was eventually indiscriminately applied by the public to all the trams built between 1936 and 1942. After the war, the system was in poor shape, and the decision was taken to replace the trams by buses starting in 1948. Following the scrapping of many older trams and the relaying of much of the track, the remainder of the network was in good condition by 1952 and could have formed the basis of a modern light rail network. One of the most impressive features of the Liverpool system was the provision of segregated grass tracks or reservations, especially in the suburban areas. Here the Green Goddesses could show a fine turn of speed. Eventually, 27 miles had been built. The final reserve track extensions took the trams out into the open countryside around Gilmoss, South Dean and Kirby, the last stretch opening as late as 1944. These were served mainly by routes 19 and 44, which were the penultimate routes to be replaced. Walton Depot was also closed to trams at the same time. The last 2 routes served Edge Lane. They were replaced on the 14th of September 1957. As the final procession of 13 cars left the pier head, every ship on the river sounded its hooter. Gone were the penny chow returns, the frequent services, and the miles of reserved track. Another lost opportunity. Speke is situated about 6 miles to the southeast of the city centre. The airport was formally opened on the 1st of July 1933, but the complete complex of buildings, hangars and control tower was not completed until just before the outbreak of World War II. The airport had been built on land acquired by the corporation in 1928. began loading baggage onto a DC-3 in 1951. Speke has never enjoyed the same prestige as Manchester's Ringway. The transatlantic shipping routes which disappeared during the 1960s were not replaced by flights from Liverpool. Much of the traffic have been either short-haul European flights or to places within the British Isles, but in recent years there has been an increase in flights to destinations further afield. It was possible to cross the Mersey by ferry, rail and road, and until 1961 by transporter. One of only 4 in Britain, it spanned not only the river but also the Manchester Ship Canal. Opened in 1905, it was owned and operated by Widnes Corporation. When built, it fulfilled a vital local need. The nearest vehicle crossings have been at either Birkenhead, 13 miles downstream, or at Stockton Heath, Warrington, 6 miles upstream. Swinging over the expanse of water could be quite nerve-wracking for the uninitiated, especially in stormy weather, when the travelling bridge would appear to sway from side to side. The vehicles were carried on a platform which had covered accommodation for foot passengers on the seaward side. In making the crossing at high water, the platform was suspended only 12 foot above the river and 4 foot 6 inches above the canal embankment. The platform was hung from a moving trolley, which ran on 32 wheels and was powered by 2 35 horsepower motors. When it closed, the single fare was 2 old pennies for vehicles and 1 old penny for pedestrians. The transporter had a span of 1,000 feet and was supported by 4 190-foot towers. As traffic rapidly increased after the war, lengthy queues would form on either side. The transporter could no longer adequately serve the needs of the district and was replaced by a new road bridge. This was a smaller version of the one across Sydney Harbour. The transporter closed in 1961. Yet another piece of Merseyside's richly fascinating transport history was all too swiftly dismantled. Many of the subjects in this tape are covered in more comprehensive detail in a range of highly acclaimed online video tapes. To guarantee profits go towards local tramway restoration projects, please order direct from the Merseyside Tramway Preservation Society.